Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome, Chip. I'd like to ask everyone to join us on Partnerships for Profit as we sit down with Chip Wagar III, one of America's leading civil trial lawyers, a best-selling author, legal educator, and host of the Killing Time Military History podcast. With over 4 decades of courtroom experience and record-setting jury verdicts in medical malpractice, Chip's story is one of relentless advocacy and deep intellectual curiosity. I love that because you do seem like a very curious man. So what was your first thought? I just, got news about this $12.6 million verdict that passed last year. What was the first thought when the jury returned with that in your favor?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Megan.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be here. For all trial lawyers that have been in this business for any period of time, there's a couple of times during a trial where your heart's literally in your throat. Mm-hmm. One of them for me is at the start of a trial when I'm waiting to begin. It's like it seems to take forever, mm-hmm. and you just want to get into it. And so the other one is after closing argument and you sit down and the judge reads the instructions and the jury retires to deliberate. And, there's nothing more you can do. It's out of your hands at that point, and you just you never know. I've been at this for long enough to have seen what I thought were some great cases go nowhere, and some other more difficult cases turn out really well. Mm-hmm. This particular case, I thought it really should turn out well. It was a terrible case. $12.6 million sounds like a lot, but after the Louisiana Medical Malpractice Act gets to it, they cap damages, and a lot of this gets taken away. Attorney's fees get taken out, expert fees, all that. So it's millions, and I was delighted. My first reaction, I was delighted for our client who had suffered so much watching his wife slowly die over a period of months. Mm-hmm. It was a relief, and it was, I was just delighted. I would say, shortly thereafter, I wish the case was in Pennsylvania or Ohio or someplace that didn't have medical malpractice caps, where my client could have gotten a bigger recovery, because there is no amount of money that can really compensate you for the loss of a loved one. It's all we have, so there it is, but it's just not enough.
Yeah, no, I imagine, and it costs a lot to go through something like that, for sure.
It does. It does, both in money and in emotional stress, The
emotional bank account. Yeah, it gets a little.
It does.
I imagine that's a really tough situation. And it sounds like a ton of money, but at the end of the day, when there are caps and you have to pay so many professionals to do their jobs in order to get the cap, just get that. That's impressive, though.
I tell people who think that's a lot of money, and our firm just deals with catastrophic cases all the time: paralysis, brain damage, amputations of limbs, babies who are brain damaged for the rest of their life. How much could I pay you to take your spouse away and,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Nothing. Or lose an arm, or, be paralyzed for the rest of your life? How much money would you take to allow me to do that to you? If you look at it that way, it's not that much.
It's absolutely nothing when it comes to the opportunities lost, the human life opportunities. So, what's the most challenging part of building a case against a medical institution? Going up against, sounds very David and Goliath, but what's the most challenging part of that?
Well, the most challenging part is the fact that you're up against an opponent who has a virtually limitless bankroll,
Hmm.
and can, hire experts and the best lawyers. This is not, as I jokingly say to people, you're not at the you're not at the slot machines. You're at the baccarat table. This
Hmm.
stakes. Winner takes all, and they have a lot of resources at their disposal, um, combined with the fact that a lot of my brothers and sisters do a lot of billboard advertising and so
Yes.
and again, they have every right to do it. I'm not saying they don't, but people have not so great a view of lawyers, and they
Hmm.
tend to give the benefit of the doubt and trust to those guys in the white coat. And so you
Hmm.
have to overcome that you have to build a trust relationship with the jurors, a credibility thing, and get them to open their minds to what is the evidence, what is the law, why did we
Yeah.
bring this case, and that people do make mistakes, and when doctors make a mistake, a lot of times it costs someone their life or can be devastating.
Yeah. Wow. 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 So what's bringing up mistakes? What's one courtroom mistake you see seasoned lawyers make in these big medical malpractice situations?
Seasoned lawyers from my side or the defense
Oh,
side?
either side. I mean, this can get as juicy as you want.
Oh, well, from my side, it's actually not a courtroom mistake.
Mhm.
It's a mistake in case screening and selection and the way they use their consulting experts. In medical malpractice, you have to have testimony by a medical doctor
Mhm.
in the same specialty or an
Yeah.
overlapping specialty as the provider that you're suing. Okay.
Right.
So you have to have a consulting expert. And the biggest mistake people make on my side is waiting way deep into the lawsuit before they start looking for an expert.
Ooh.
Uh, and what you may not find one, or you may not find a credible one.
Mhm.
But even more than that, during the course of the case, you lose all the advantages of a consultant who can help you
Mhm.
identify the medical side, the medical issues in the case. What are the likely defenses the other side will do? So that consulting relationship between a lawyer and the doctor who's going to testify,
Yeah.
you know, is super important. So that do not wait,
Mhm.
until late in the game, because you may not find one. On the other side, on the defense side, um, I think I think putting too high a trust in what their client tells them
Mhm.
is the defense in the case. Doctors are just like anybody else,
Mhm.
and they are in a state of denial, particularly if what they did or failed to do caused a terrible injury or death.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to accept that. I understand that. And they can, in their own minds, try and justify or rationalize or whatever and torture the facts a little bit. And as a defense lawyer, you really need to be objective about this and give advice to that doctor
Mhm.
that that's not going to hold up in a courtroom. It's just
Mhm.
not. We should settle this case and move on with your life. But
Mhm.
instead, they get they put too much stock in what their own client says, opposed to objectively
Yeah.
reasoning it out.
Yeah. It sounds like the reason we got into this was putting too much stock into what the doctors were saying. And so, you know,
Right, right.
um, so I see that you teach at Tulane as well.
At
And
Loyola.
oh, Loyola. And what do your students find most surprising about medical malpractice laws today?
I think they're shocked at how one-sided the system is.
Hmm.
I think they're shocked, and usually my opening class is how prevalent medical malpractice is and how deadly it is.
Yeah.
Medical malpractice as a subsection of personal injury law is very small. It's just a slice. But medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in the United States. A lot of people don't know that.
Impressive.
It's right behind heart disease and cancer. It is estimated between 250,000 or 440,000 people die in the United States a year from medical malpractice.
I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, people don't talk about that, I feel.
No, they don't. Here's another one that'll blow your mind. There are studies, and you can look this up. There's about, I'm going to use round numbers, about 50,000 deaths by gunshot in the United States every year, either suicides or homicides.
Mm-hmm.
Another 50,000 die in vehicular accidents in the United States every year.
Yeah.
If you put those together and multiplied them by 3 to 5, depending on which figures you use, that's how many people die of medical malpractice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So
and the other thing is the severity of the injuries. Not only is it much more prevalent than people think, but the injuries are devastating. I mean, just as bad as anything else, death, and some things are worse than death. I think, quadriplegia, paralysis, brain damage, I mean, it's about as bad as it gets. So I think my students are usually, I start off with that, and they become very attentive during that.
I bet they're really leaning
Yes.
in after that. They're like, oh man, how do I change this? How do I move forward in a better way?
One of the things I think that they would tell you too is the course. I mean, I'm trying to, of course, teach them about the law and medical malpractice, but there's a lot of things, you're going through these cases. We go through probably better part of 100 cases during the course, and you see all kinds of medical malpractice that actually informs you of things that might happen in your own life or in someone you love, oh my God, they did that. And, that was a misdiagnosis. And it can open your eyes to common things that could happen to you.
It's kind of hard to sit and listen to, just because I have my own misdiagnosis stories. My sister does, my niece and nephew do. It's so common that I don't know. It just feels like it's not something that people can even really go after.
Well, there are studies. Again, you can look this up. This isn't me, but since I teach the course, I have, I do research it. Misdiagnosis is responsible, I think, for more than 50% of all medical malpractice cases. It's no question, the leading source of medical malpractice. Wow. Because when you think about it, you're then being treated for something you don't have. Yeah. And you're not being treated for something you do have. And that can lead to devastating consequences.
Yeah. And the whole mindset of healing one thing when you're supposed to be healing another is absolutely devastating in the way that it has to do with the life choices you make on a daily basis.
Of course.
The medicine you take, the exercise, the physical therapy you do, it all has to do with, one diagnosis after, over another, that sort of thing. So, shifting gears a little bit here, what sparked your passion for writing historical fiction? When I was reading this about you, I'm the theater nerd in me is the historical theater nerd in me is excited too. So what drew you to historical fiction after a lifetime as, a med mal attorney?
Well, first of all, my undergraduate background was in history, a lot of history. Um, I went, as a student abroad for my junior year, and this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I was a student abroad in Vienna
Wow.
when I was a undergraduate, and I got my degree in international affairs, which is heavily a lot of history. So I
Yeah.
love history, and I read a lot about it and so forth. As far as the deciding to write a novel, I don't know. I guess everyone has to have a hobby,
Mhm.
and I like stories and I like storytelling. As a trial lawyer, a lot of what you do is storytelling. Who
Absolutely.
doesn't like a story? Who doesn't
Right.
like to hear a good story?
Yeah.
And so I just started writing. I mean, one of the keys to being a writer is to start writing.
Just
Write
do
it
it.
down.
Yeah.
Start it. And I started with an American in Vienna, which kind of wrapped up some of my, acquaintance with Vienna and Eastern Europe and
Mhm.
so forth into a novel. And, one chapter followed another, and I really liked it. And I just kept writing and writing, and, the story, unfolded. So
Wow.
it's really love of history. And, as a lawyer, you do a lot of writing anyway. So
Mhm.
I think my grammar is above average. And,
Only slightly, I'm sure. So what drew you to on that? I read about this double emperor. What drew you to Emperor Francis of Austria? I'm sure it was that time, that you were there. But what do you find so fascinating about Emperor Francis?
well, you can barely see it, but in the background, over my right shoulder there, you can see in the corner a little bit of a picture of Napoleon Bonaparte. Actually,
Oh,
that's a poster of a 1927 silent movie that was very famous in its day,
mhm.
um, about Napoleon. So that period of time, I really like reading about
Yeah,
Napoleon, Duke of Wellington, and so forth. And there are
yeah.
a lot of, you know, there's certain era. I mean, history is so vast, so many countries, such a huge amount of time. I mean, so I know more about certain periods and
Mhm.
certain, areas than I do about others.
Yeah, we all
But
have our chunks that we like more than others.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so that's one period that I'm really interested in and read a lot about. So I'll say that I don't know if you've ever been to Vienna,
No,
but
no.
um, a lot of Americans that have any interest in history at all know a fair bit about English history,
Mhm.
Henry VIII and his seven wives, and you
Yeah.
know all that, and maybe French history, Louis XIV, Versailles, the Sun King, and Napoleon, and so forth. But as you move further into Europe, deeper into Eastern Europe, most Americans' knowledge plummets. They know Germany from the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler,
Mhm.
but before that, they don't know much about the Holy Roman Empire, or
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that. So when I was in Vienna, the first week or two I was in Vienna, which is a beautiful city. It rivals Paris. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just a magnificent city. So I'm walking around and I'm seeing all these statues like they have in European cities, right? These
Mhm.
people on horseback and so forth and so on. Now, if you're in Paris, you'll see Napoleon standing on top of, or, this one or that, and you've heard of them, or the
Mhm.
Trafalgar Square, you'll see Lord Nelson on. And I'm walking around, I don't know who any of these people are. I
Oh,
don't know. Who are these people? And I'm
right.
seeing these gorgeous palaces and so forth,
Mhm.
who are the Habsburgs? And I've never heard of these people before.
Yeah.
So I got into learning about them while I was there. And then to get to Francis, the emperor, there was no other biography in English of him.
Mhm.
So that was intriguing to me. And he was
Yeah, an emperor with no other biography. What?
no, in English. There are two in German, but they've
Yeah.
never been translated. And this is a guy who was Napoleon's father-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Napoleon married his daughter. He went to war with Napoleon 5 times.
Oh, that's so impressive. Okay.
He lost 4 out of 5, but won the
Oh.
last one.
Oh, yeah.
He's the emperor who Metternich was his chancellor.
Mm-hmm.
He's the emperor that presided over the Congress of Vienna, where European history for the next 100 years was pretty much decided.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And it just, wow, there's no biography of this guy. And so I decided to start reading about him and doing some research. And he's a fascinating figure. And I really, really enjoyed bringing him to life to the extent, you can do that in a book.
That's so fascinating. I mean, really, having the ability to bring a character to life in a book like that is, that's really, it's quite a talent. I just took the New Orleans, a little while ago, I took the New Orleans history exam you have to take in order to be a tour guide in the city. And one of the questions, there's only 50 questions, okay? One of the questions was, it was true or false. Napoleon Bonaparte came to New Orleans. And it's false. He never made it here. Yeah, Nicholas Girard built that, house residence. Now,
the Napoleon house.
Yeah, the Napoleon house, and he never made it there. So
they would have liked to. They tried, but he died before they could get to him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and so much around here is named after him. So, yeah.
Well, so he's a titanic figure in his day. Two of my children were exchange students when they were in high school with French families. They both learned French to some extent. Anyway, one set of parents eventually, a few years later, visited us, and, love of history and so forth. I asked the father, I said, how do the French feel about Napoleon now? Because he was responsible for a lot of death,
Yeah.
And he looked at me and smiled and said, if you're French, you like Napoleon.
Yeah. And so much about our history here is so French too. So what's my next question is, what's one historic battle from Killing Time that sticks with you, that gives you chills, that what's and I didn't want to phrase this question like this, but the question is, what's your favorite historic battle from Killing Time?
Boy, that's a really tough one. Because there are so many interesting ones that could have changed the course of history. I would say the one that intrigues me the most is the fall of France in 1940.
Okay.
It is such a stunner. Never should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And if it hadn't happened, all the horrors of the Holocaust and the gruesome mass deaths in Russia and Poland and Eastern Europe and all of the destruction and the destruction of Germany, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever been, my wife and I went to Berlin probably 10 or 12 years ago, just after a few years after the wall had come down.
Yeah.
And in most places of any consequence in Berlin, you walk in the door and there'll be a picture. This is how it looked in 1945. And it's nothing. I mean, it's the walls. It's nothing. Yeah. It's completely caved in. The streets rubble. It's absolutely ruined,
Wow.
And so, and the French army in 1940 was more than a match for the German army. Much more than a match. Their equipment was better. Their soldiers were just as good. but they suffered from a really bad top of their command. And the Germans, unfortunately for everyone, had brilliant generals at the top that figured out one way they could defeat the French army and the British army too. The British army was much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
One way that they would surprise them and they would never expect, and they pulled it off, and it's like they cracked a nut open. I mean, it just absolutely caused the collapse. And it's a tragedy. It's a really huge tragedy. In fact, the British commander-in-chief at the time, Lord Ironside was his name, believe it or not. Great name for a military leader.
Great name.
He said this would be the greatest military catastrophe of the 20th century, if not for all time. And he was right.
Yeah. Wow.
So
and what consequences? I mean,
yes, terrible.
I find that so fascinating to talk about, today. So just to wrap things up, Chip, what do you hope your professional legacy will be? I mean, you seem like you have a lot going on, a lot of different projects happening. Is this just the never-endingness of your curiosity? But what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I guess like most people, my greatest joy and pleasure comes from my family, my children, my grandchildren, and the time I've spent with them and so forth. As far as a legacy, I'm working to change the draconian, barbaric, brutal Medical Malpractice Act in Louisiana, which is the most draconian in the nation. And I sure would like my legacy to be that I changed that law to help people who've been injured and killed by medical malpractice and their families. I don't know if I'm ever going to get there, but that would be great. Other than that, I just hope people remember I tried to help people along the way. Yes, it's a business that we're in, but there's no greater thrill or satisfaction than like that verdict we got, or some of the others that have happened, of being able to help someone who's suffered just a life-altering injury or death. It's tremendously satisfying, and I hope that'll be my legacy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today on Partnerships for Profit, Chip. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.